Ma'am, please step away from the vehicle.
Officer, what's going on?
Is there a problem here? Just a routine check.
The encounter begins in a quiet, residential parking area. Steps from a woman's own front door. She is standing beside her car, keys in hand, when a federal immigration agent approaches and asks for proof that she belongs in the country where she was born. The request is not prompted by a warrant, a crime, or a complaint. It is prompted by her presence. Within moments, a routine afternoon transforms into a confrontation about identity, authority, and constitutional limits. A man standing beside her challenges the demand, asking the question that hangs in the air. On what legal basis can a citizen be required to prove citizenship outside her own home? As neighbors watch and phones begin recording, the balance of power becomes visible. One person carries a badge, the other carries nothing but her rights. What follows will reach far beyond a parking lot. Internal agency policies, civil rights statutes, and the boundaries of lawful stops will be scrutinized, and the consequences will not only affect one officer, but will expose deeper concerns about profiling, accountability, and the fragile line between enforcement and overreach. The first visible moment begins with a federal immigration agent standing a few feet from a black woman beside her car. The setting is a quiet, residential parking area outside an apartment complex. It is mid-afternoon. The pavement is dry. Nearby balconies overlook the lot. The woman is holding her keys and a small bag, preparing to leave. Instead, she is being asked to prove she belongs in her own country. The agent's request is direct. He identifies himself as working for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. He asks for proof of citizenship. There is no mention of a warrant. No report of a crime. No visible emergency. The demand appears tied only to her presence in that space. A man stands beside her. He is close enough to hear every word. He begins to question why documentation is being requested. His posture is firm but controlled. He does not interfere physically. He simply challenges the basis for the request. The agent remains focused on the woman. Security cameras are mounted on the building corners. A neighbor across the lot pauses while unloading groceries. Another resident steps onto a balcony. A phone is raised. Recording begins. The woman does not match the image often shown in enforcement briefings. She is dressed in work clothes, neat and plain. She lives in the building behind her. She pays rent there. Her car is parked in an assigned space. Nothing about her actions suggests flight or concealment. She is standing in open view. The agent maintains a steady tone. His badge is visible. His sidearm rests at his hip. The weight of federal authority is present without being spoken. The woman's shoulders tighten, her hands remain visible. She appears confused. The request has come without warning. The man continues to question the legal grounds. He gestures toward the building. He points out that this is her home. The agent does not step back. He repeats the need for proof. The space between them feels smaller. More residents begin watching. The atmosphere shifts from private exchange to public incident. The camera held by a bystander captures faces, distance, and body language. The encounter is no longer temporary. It is documented. The woman's breathing grows more controlled, as if she is trying to steady herself. She does not attempt to leave. She does not raise her voice. She stands in place, aware that any movement could be misunderstood. What began as an ordinary afternoon in a residential lot has turned into a visible test of authority and identity. The question of why she was approached hangs over the scene as recording continues. She had lived in the apartment complex for nearly 3 years. The unit was small but stable. Rent was paid on time each month. Her name was on the lease. She worked full-time at a medical supply warehouse 10 minutes away. Most mornings began before sunrise. She packed her lunch, checked her email, and drove the same route to work. On weekends, she visited her mother across town and helped with errands. She was born in the United States. Her birth certificate was issued in a public hospital, less than an hour from where she now lived. She had voted in local elections. She carried a state-issued driver's license. None of that history was visible in the parking lot that afternoon. The demand for proof of citizenship did not feel like a simple request. It felt like an accusation. If she could not produce documents on the spot, she risked being detained. Detention, even for a few hours, could affect her job. Her employer required notice for missed shifts. Too many absences could lead to termination. A record of immigration questioning could also create long-term confusion, even if it ended with no charges. So, standing beside her car, she understood the imbalance. The agent had federal authority. He had a badge, a weapon, and the power to restrain. She had only her word and whatever documents happened to be in her bag. Her birth certificate was not something she carried daily. Few people do. The presence of neighbors made the moment heavier. Some watched quietly. Others continued recording. She was aware that her face might appear online before she even understood what was happening. Public exposure can change how a person is seen at work and in their community. It can bring support, but it can also bring judgment. Her routine life did not prepare her for being asked to justify her existence outside her own home. She had followed the same daily patterns for years without incident. There had been no prior contact with immigration officials, no warnings, no notices in the mail. As she stood in that parking space, the risk was not abstract. It was immediate. A single decision by the agent could lead to handcuffs, transportation to a field office, and hours of uncertainty. Even if she was eventually released, the experience could leave lasting emotional strain. The normal details of her life made the moment more stark. A resident, a worker, a daughter. Reduced, in seconds, to someone required to prove she belonged. Federal immigration agents have authority to question individuals about their status under certain conditions. That authority, however, is not unlimited. In public spaces, officers may approach and ask questions if the encounter is voluntary. A person has the right to walk away, unless the officer has reasonable suspicion that a specific law has been broken. Reasonable suspicion means clear, factual reasons, not a vague feeling or a general profile. Outside a private residence, the rules become more sensitive. The area directly around a home carries added constitutional protection. And courts have long recognized that a person's home, and the space closely connected to it, deserves stronger privacy safeguards. Entering that space without a warrant or urgent circumstances can violate those protections. In the parking lot, the woman was steps from her front door. Her car was in an assigned residential space. There was no report of a crime in progress. No visible attempt to flee. The agent did not reference a specific investigation tied to her name or address. The request focused on proof of citizenship. If the encounter was voluntary, she had the right to decline to answer questions. If it was not voluntary, the agent would need reasonable suspicion to detain her. Detention means a person is not free to leave. It can be brief, but it must be supported by specific facts. Courts require that those facts be clear enough to justify stopping someone's movement. The man beside her continued to press this point. His objections were not emotional. They centered on legality. On what grounds was documentation required? Was she free to go? The agent's posture remained firm. He did not clearly state that she was detained, but he did not indicate that she was free to leave either. This ambiguity matters. When a person is unsure whether walking away could lead to arrest, the encounter shifts in tone. Power becomes implied rather than stated. The presence of a visible weapon, a badge, and federal authority can make even a simple request feel compulsory. Residents watching from balconies could not hear every word, but they could see the distance between the parties and the stillness of the woman's stance. Phones continued recording. The legal boundary between inquiry and overreach was no longer theoretical. It was unfolding in real time. In a space meant to feel safe, the presence of cameras changed the nature of the encounter. At first, only one phone was visible, held at chest level by a neighbor across the lot. Within minutes, another resident began recording from a balcony above. The apartment complex itself had fixed security cameras mounted near stairwells and entry points. Small red indicator lights showed they were active. The man standing beside the woman shifted slightly so that the phone camera had a clear view. He kept his hands visible. His movements were slow and deliberate. The goal appeared to be documentation, not confrontation, and the agent was aware he was being recorded. His posture remained upright. His gestures were controlled. Video captures details that memory can distort. It shows distance between people. It shows whether someone attempts to leave. It shows how close an officer stands and whether physical contact occurs. In this case, the footage documented the setting clearly. The woman remained beside her car. She did not approach the agent. She did not attempt to run, she stayed in place. Neighbors later described a shift in atmosphere once phones were raised. The encounter felt less isolated. It became something that would exist beyond the moment. Recording can serve as a form of informal oversight. It creates a record that can be reviewed by supervisors, attorneys, or the public. The woman appeared increasingly aware of the cameras. Her face tightened. She adjusted her stance, keeping her hands steady. Public exposure added another layer of pressure. The incident was no longer just about documentation. It was about how she would be seen. The agent did not instruct bystanders to stop recording. He continued focusing on his request. The interaction remained verbal. No physical restraint occurred during this phase. The lack of physical force did not erase the imbalance. Authority was still present. Within hours, short clips from the phones would begin circulating among residents. From there, they would move further. What happened in that parking lot was now preserved in digital form. The recording ensured that the event could not fade into private disagreement. It would become a documented encounter, open to review and scrutiny. By the next day, the video had moved beyond the apartment complex. A short clip appeared on local social media pages. The footage showed the agent standing close to the woman and repeating his request for proof of citizenship. It showed the man questioning the legal basis. It showed the residential setting clearly in the background. Community members reacted quickly. Some focused on the simple fact that she was outside her own home. Others pointed to the absence of any visible cause for the stop. Civil rights advocates in the area shared the clip and called for clarification from federal officials. The central concern was whether race played a role in the decision to approach her. The woman is black. In the video, no other residents are stopped or questioned. So our viewers began comparing this encounter to past reports of disproportionate questioning of black individuals in public spaces. While each case must stand on its own facts, history shaped how this moment was understood. Patterns of enforcement matter when assessing intent and fairness. Local community leaders released measured statements. They did not accuse without evidence. Instead, they asked for transparency. They requested confirmation of whether the agent had reasonable suspicion tied to a specific investigation. They also asked whether departmental guidelines were followed. The apartment complex management confirmed that federal agents had not contacted them in advance. There had been no notice of an operation targeting a specific unit. Residents expressed unease about the idea that someone could be required to prove citizenship steps from their door. Media outlets began reaching out for comment. The woman declined on-camera interviews at first. The attention was sudden and overwhelming. She continued going to work, aware that co-workers had likely seen the footage. The discussion broadened from a single parking lot to larger questions about profiling and civil liberties. The issue was no longer only about one request for documents. It was about how enforcement decisions are made and whether constitutional protections apply equally in everyday spaces. Public scrutiny was increasing. An official response was becoming unavoidable. Within 48 hours, Immigration and Customs Enforcement released a brief public statement. The agency confirmed that one of its officers had conducted what it described as a field inquiry in the area. The statement emphasized that agents are authorized to question individuals regarding immigration status when appropriate. It did not specify what prompted the approach in this case. The wording was careful. It stated that officers are trained to follow constitutional guidelines and agency policy. It also noted that an internal review would examine the circumstances captured on video. No admission of wrongdoing was made. No disciplinary action was announced at that time. Reporters pressed for more detail. They asked whether the agent had reasonable suspicion tied to a specific investigation. They asked whether any complaint had been filed against the woman. And the agency declined to provide operational specifics, citing privacy and security concerns. Behind the scenes, supervisors reviewed body camera footage and activity logs. Federal agents are typically required to document field encounters, including time, location, and purpose. Those records would show whether the agent had been dispatched to the complex for a targeted reason or whether the contact was self-initiated. Saying the gap between the public video and the official language became a focal point. The video showed a woman near her own residence being asked for proof of citizenship. The statement described a lawful inquiry. It did not address why she, specifically, had been selected. Civil rights attorneys began submitting formal requests for records. These requests, often filed under public information laws, seek internal reports, training materials, and communications related to the incident. While not all federal records are immediately released, such requests can trigger deeper review. Within the agency, the review process followed a structured path. Supervisors assessed whether policy had been followed. If concerns were identified, the matter could be referred to an internal affairs unit for further investigation. That process can lead to retraining, reprimand, or other administrative measures. For the woman at the center of the incident, the official response offered little clarity. The agency had acknowledged the event, but had not explained it. The question of whether the approach was justified remained unresolved, now framed within formal review procedures. After consulting with her family, the woman decided to speak with a civil rights attorney. The meeting took place in a small office downtown. She brought a copy of the video and a written account of what she remembered. The attorney reviewed the footage carefully, pausing at key moments to note distance, tone, and positioning. The legal question was straightforward in principle, but complex in practice. Did the agent have reasonable suspicion to detain her? If she was not free to leave, even briefly, that could qualify as a detention. Detention without specific facts could violate the Fourth Amendment, which protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. There was also the question of equal protection, some meaning whether she was treated differently because of race. The attorney explained that filing a civil claim would not be simple. Federal officers are protected by certain legal doctrines that limit lawsuits unless clear constitutional violations are shown. Still, documented evidence strengthens a case. The presence of multiple recordings provided a factual base that did not rely only on memory. A formal complaint was filed with the agency's Internal Oversight Office. At the same time, the attorney prepared a notice of claim, a required step before pursuing federal litigation. This document outlined the alleged violations and the harm suffered. Harm was not limited to physical injury. Emotional distress, reputational damage, and fear of future encounters can also carry weight. Financial stakes began to take shape. If a court found that her rights were violated, damages could include compensation for emotional harm and legal costs. In some cases, settlements reach significant figures, especially when policy failures are identified. The goal, however, was not only compensation, it was accountability. The filing triggered deadlines. The agency would have to respond formally. Internal records related to the stop could become subject to review. What began as a brief encounter in a parking lot was now entering a structured legal process where facts would be tested against constitutional standards. Once the claim moved forward, the discovery process began. Discovery is a stage in a legal case where both sides must share relevant evidence. The woman's legal team requested body camera footage, dispatch records, field notes, and any written justification for the stop. They also asked for training materials that explained when agents may request proof of citizenship. The agency produced portions of the file in stages. Body camera footage confirmed the timing of the encounter and the absence of any prior interaction with the woman that day. Dispatch logs did not show a call tied to her name or apartment number. The records indicated that the agent had been conducting general enforcement activity in the area. Training documents outline that reasonable suspicion must be based on specific, articulable facts. General appearance or location alone could not justify detention. Supervisory emails revealed internal discussion about how the incident was being perceived publicly. Some messages focused on policy compliance. Others addressed reputational impact. Attorneys examined whether the woman had been free to leave. In the footage, the agent stood between her and the exit path of the parking space. He did not physically restrain her, but his positioning limited movement. Experts in law enforcement procedure reviewed the video and prepared written opinions. Their analysis centered on whether a reasonable person in her position would have felt free to walk away. The financial dimension became clearer as legal costs mounted. Preparing expert reports, reviewing hours of footage, and responding to filings required substantial resources. The agency also faced expenses in defending the claim. Prolonged litigation can increase pressure on both sides to consider settlement. No evidence surfaced linking the woman to an active immigration investigation. The lack of documented suspicion became a central point. As discovery closed, the factual record was more complete. The case now rested on whether those facts met the constitutional threshold required to justify the stop. As the case approached a critical stage, both sides faced a decision. The evidence gathered during discovery had clarified key points. There was no record tying the woman to a specific investigation. There was no documented tip, warrant, or complaint linked to her name or address. The body camera footage showed a calm but firm demand for proof of citizenship in a residential setting. Before trial, mediation was scheduled. Mediation is a structured negotiation led by a neutral third party. It allows both sides to discuss settlement without admitting fault. During these sessions, the woman's attorneys presented the video evidence, the dispatch logs, and expert analysis. They argued that a reasonable person in her position would not have felt free to leave. The agency's legal team defended the agent's discretion, but acknowledged the public concern raised by the footage. They emphasized that no physical force had been used and that the encounter was brief. Still, the risk of an unfavorable court ruling carried financial and institutional consequences. After extended negotiation, a settlement was reached. The agency agreed to pay a six-figure sum to resolve the civil claim. The agreement included coverage of attorneys' fees and compensation for emotional distress. While the settlement did not include an admission of wrongdoing, it required the agency to reinforce training on constitutional limits during field encounters. Internally, the agent received formal retraining and a written reprimand placed in his personnel file. Supervisors issued updated guidance clarifying that requests for proof of citizenship must be supported by documented, specific facts. For the woman, the resolution was measured but meaningful. The financial compensation addressed tangible harm. More importantly, the official policy clarification acknowledged that the boundaries of authority had been tested. The encounter in the parking lot had led to documented consequences, recorded in both legal and institutional records. In the months after the settlement, daily life slowly returned to routine. The woman continued working at the warehouse. She resumed weekend visits with her mother. The parking space outside her apartment no longer felt like a stage, but the memory of that afternoon did not disappear. She remained more aware of her surroundings, especially when unfamiliar vehicles entered the lot. Neighbors who had recorded the incident spoke about it more openly. Some said they felt reassured that documentation had made a difference. Others admitted they had not previously considered how quickly a routine moment could shift into a legal confrontation. The apartment complex management installed additional signage reminding residents of their rights to record public officials performing duties in public view. Within the agency, updated training modules were circulated nationwide. These materials emphasize that reasonable suspicion must be based on clear, documented facts. Supervisors were instructed to review field encounters more closely when they occur near residences. While policy revisions cannot erase past events, they can shape future conduct. The financial settlement was not publicly celebrated. It was processed as a legal resolution. The amount covered damages and legal costs, but it also represented acknowledgement that constitutional boundaries matter. The written reprimand in the agent's file became part of his professional record. For the woman, the most lasting impact was psychological. She described feeling unsettled for weeks after the encounter. Over time, that fear lessened, replaced by a cautious confidence that her rights had been affirmed through formal channels. What began as a brief demand in a parking lot resulted in documented accountability. The balance of power did not disappear, but it was tested, reviewed, and corrected through legal process. The evidence preserved on phone cameras ensured that the moment would not be reduced to conflicting stories. It became a record, and from that record came consequence.